Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is a review of The Adventures of Tarzan starring Elmo Lincoln. So, this is a silent movie that adapted The Return of Tarzan, and it was originally released in 1921 as a 15-chapter serial. Now, that version of it doesn't exist anymore, it's lost to time. What did survive is a 10-chapter version that is available to watch in various places, including YouTube. And what we're looking at today is a 1 hour feature version of it released in 1928 that was cut from that 10-chapter version. So, just a quick recap, the first Tarzan movie was Tarzan and the Apes in 1918. This was a great, faithful adaptation of the first part of that novel. And then the second part came out in 1919. It was called The Romance of Tarzan, but that one is lost to time. In 1920, they came out with a serial of Son of Tarzan, fantastic adaptation of that novel. I've done a review of that. Also in 1920, they came out with a movie called The Revenge of Tarzan, and that adapted the first part of Return of Tarzan, which had Tarzan facing off against Nikolai Rokov in Europe and the Middle East, and unfortunately that one is lost to time. If you ever want to see a good screen adaptation of the first part of that novel, watch the first episode of Tarzan the Epic Adventures on Tubi. It is fantastic. And so that brings us to this movie, which adapts the last half of Return of Tarzan. This is the part where he returns to the jungle and befriends the Wazari, becomes their chief, and then discovers the lost city of Opar, which is the first lost city in the Tarzan novels. And so this last half of Return of Tarzan is really what would define the character and what would define the direction of Tarzan novels going forward. And while this movie does have those elements in it, unfortunately it does it in a completely new story that doesn't resemble the novel at all and is just honestly not very good. I think this movie had the best of intentions. I think it was trying to put Jane and Nikolai Rokov, who were largely absent from the main action of the last half of the novel, into the story in a very active way, making Nikolai Rokov this main villain in the last half and having him, on this quest to get to Opar and take it over and steal the treasure and stuff, which sounds great on paper. Having Tarzan and Jane together throughout that last half sounds great on paper. Unfortunately, the way it's done here is just badly written and hokey and just not very well put together. So what the 10-chapter serial version of this has that the 1 hour feature version doesn't have, William Cecil Clayton does appear in the 10-chapter version. This will be the first time in a surviving film we've seen him go full villain, not just flirting with the dark side like we saw him do in Tarzan of the Apes. This is full movie villain William Cecil Clayton. However, why he is allied with Nikolai Rokov, I don't know. I can't tell you watching the 10-chapter version. There may be something in the 15-chapter version to explain it that's lost to time. I also can't tell you what happened to Clayton. He appears at the beginning of that version and then he just stops appearing without explanation. Again, probably something that got lost in that longer version. The Wazari are here, and there are a few glorious minutes that are taken directly from the novel, with Tarzan leading them against the Arab raiders. Unfortunately, it is buried in this original story that they're telling that's not very good. When the Wazari first see him in this version, they just say, "Big Moana," and start following him, and that's it. He teaches them how to shoot a bow and arrow, which makes no sense. They should have already known that. And what makes even less sense, they are established as his allies that he is leading and all of this. But for some reason, there was a Wazari witch doctor who has actual magic who threatens Jane. He actually has these vines wrap around Jane and stuff. And I can't tell you why he was doing this. I have no idea why he was threatening Jane and attacking her. And I cannot tell you how she got out of that situation. The next time you see her, she's actually kidnapped by Rockoff, and we don't have any explanation as to how she got out of that previous situation and into the new one. That just kept happening over and over again in the 10-chapter serial. So the 10-chapter version is an incoherent mess. This is a more coherent mess. When stuff is missing from here, they do have the decency to put up some text to tell you, hey, this character got out of this situation. Hey, this character is now in a new situation that we didn't show you in the previous scene. It's still frustrating not being able to see all of this missing stuff, but at least they let you know that it's not there. And so this version of it begins after those scenes I described with Clayton and the Wazari. They don't appear in here at all. It actually starts with a desert adventure portion of the story that is honestly not very good. There's fight scenes and escape scenes that are missing here that are replaced with text cards, but trust me, you're not missing a whole lot. It gets better when they get to the jungle. We do get a screen version of Opar for the first time ever, and Lillian Worth plays the very first Law, and unfortunately she doesn't look anything like Law, and this barely resembles Opar. You would think Opar was just an underground tunnel if you watch this movie. It's kind of sad, to be honest with you. If you watch the 10-chapter version, there is a very brief scene where we get a glance at the sacrificial chamber, and unfortunately the footage is very deteriorated, and it really doesn't look like there was a whole lot to that set either. The Oparians just don't seem like they're much of a match for Rockoff's men, and just don't have that type of gravitas and menace that you got from the novels at all. There are some pretty decent animal scenes in here. We do get some stuff with elephants. We get a lot of stuff with lions. They definitely got their money's worth out of the lions, especially in the 10-chapter version, but they're also here, and the scenes are pretty impressive. However, of course, we are dealing with wild animals, and of course, doing a lot of stuff with lions is, of course, dangerous. And of course, one day, 3 lions did escape and ran amok on the set, and 5 people were hospitalized. 3 cameras were destroyed, and the footage for that day was ruined. So always be careful of lions on set, kids. I do think Elmo Lincoln probably resisted the urge to stab any of them to death this time. Lincoln is an okay Tarzan in here. I mean, there's just not a lot to say. I mean, the story of this movie just isn't very good, and unfortunately Lincoln just doesn't really capture the look of Tarzan very well, either in costume or unfortunately body-wise either. I suppose nowadays we would call him Dad Bod Tarzan, but we will get actors who are a little closer to that look in other films. Actually, in the previous film, he'd already been replaced with another actor. And going forward, we'll see what other actors bring to the role. And so, yeah, it's hard for me to recommend this other than as a historical curiosity. If you do want to see this version of it, the Grapevine Video DVD that I have here is probably the way to go, because they tint it, and that helps a lot on being able to see what's going on. But the 10-chapter version will give you things like the Wazari, so that's something to consider as well if you are interested in checking this out. As far as a good screen representation of the last half of Return of Tarzan, check out Tarzan and the Priestess of Opar from Tarzan the Epic Adventures. That's also on Tubi. That's a great episode that really, really captures both Opar and Law. However, Hollywood will get another chance at Law of Opar in a silent movie in Tarzan the Tiger, but that's a couple movies down the road. Next time, we're actually going to look at another attempt at Hollywood to come up with an original story when adapting a Burroughs novel, and we'll see if they get it right this time. Join me as we take a look at Tarzan and the Golden Lion. See ya.